What if your media was captured by foreign armies during wartime? This is what happened to Radio Luxembourg during World War II. Leading up to the war, the station ceased activities to remain neutral. After the German invasion, the station was acquisitioned by the Reich Broadcasting Corporation to expand the reach of German-based radio stations. It was initially used during wartime by the Irish radio broadcaster William Joyce, also known as Lord Haw-Haw, to broadcast pro-German programming. Joyce was a former member of the British Union of Fascists and was known for his opposition to the English leadership.
Indeed, Mr. Churchill, with quite unusual frankness, admitted that the military results of the Belgian capitulation would be very grave. When this spiteful old creature, blind with prejudice and playing the almighty dictator, has to use such language, the end cannot be far distant.
After the Allied invasion of 1944, Radio Luxembourg was given to the Americans by the Luxembourg government in exile. It was operated by the Office of War Information and the Psychological Warfare Division. This was under the direction of William S. Paley, and many of the officers stationed there were psychological warfare officers known as Richie Boys. During the war, Paley worked with Edward Murrow, who would in turn work with Richie Boys' David Schönbrunn and Herman Lang after the war. Paley had also previously been awarded the Carlos Manuel de Céspedes National Order of Merit by the Cuban government for helping to foster good relations between the Cuban and American governments. He was also later known as something of a rival to his counterpart at the Radio Corporation of America, David Sarnoff. During the war, Sarnoff was on Dwight D. Eisenhower's staff as a communications consultant and would years later work with Richie Boy, Frank Branstetter, to broadcast the first interview of Fidel Castro in Cuba with Jack Paar to the American public immediately following his revolution. Branstetter credited the training he received at Camp Ritchie with his framing of the interview questions for Castro at the time. The Allied Black Propaganda Project at Radio Luxembourg was also known as Operation Annie or Radio 1212. Their mission was to keep the station running, ostensibly as a pro-German station still under German control, but slowly demoralize and sow seeds of resistance from within Germany. They would play German music, report local news, troop movements, and foster anti-government sentiments, working towards their own vision of a new Germany. Richie Boys who worked on Operation Annie included Rudolf H. Michels, Hannes Berger, Hans Habe, Oskar Seidlin, Walter Kohner, Joseph Wechsberg, Albert G. Rosenberg, and Benno D. Frank. Benno Frank was the chief announcer for Operation Annie as a member of the Morale Operations Branch. In this capacity, Frank spoke to Germans on the airwaves regarding military events, air raids, and instructed fictitious resistance groups. The program was also used to insert false reports of evacuation and mobilization orders, rumors, and highly exaggerated information in the hope of causing chaos with German civilians and military alike. After making many of the Germans believe the station was still under their control in April of 1945, Annie switched its programming to full deception. By using conjecture and rumor, the radio station fed false reports on troop movements to mislead the Germans on the locations of the advancing Allied forces. In doing so, Annie managed to help trap 350,000 German soldiers from Army Group B in the Ruhr Pocket. This led to their surrender and the immediate suicide of the German General Walter Model. After the war, the Irish pro-German broadcaster William Joyce was captured and executed by the British. Richie Boy Hannes Berger wrote a recount of his experiences of Operation Annie for the New York Times, the newspaper owned by the family of Richie Boy John Oakes. In the article, he explained the Ruhr Pocket capture as the day when Annie grew up to be a really bad girl. In 1946, Brewster Morgan also wrote about his experiences at Operation Annie for the Saturday Evening Post. Radio Luxembourg was briefly used by the Voice of America before being given back to the native government. Richie Boy Hans Habe and others stayed on in post-war Germany to rebuild the German press and media. To learn more about these psychological warfare officers, pick up a copy of The Quiet Contingent, an addendum on World War II, The Boys of Camp Ritchie, available on Amazon.